I am here with video number 1 for February's collection, Sawyer. So because there is no in-person event this time around, I am going to actually do one video with all of the cut instructions. All right, and that way, if you are unsure of yourself, or you feel like you're just not sure where to start or whatever, doesn't matter. Okay, I am going to walk you through cutting each of the papers. So what you're going to need for this video is your 1 sheet of Harbor glitter paper, your pack of Sawyer, which is your 6 sheets, and then your custom 12 pack, which included 2 grape, 4 Harbor, 2 mint, 2 mulberry, 2 white daisy, and then, as it says down at the bottom here, additional supplies, 1 extra sheet of white daisy cardstock. Okay, so now I have my cut guide here, and I want to just talk about this part here right now. Okay, the abbreviations. All right, so these instructions would get very long if I wrote everything out in full. So these are the abbreviations that are most commonly found in my cut guides. The C/S, that means cardstock. If you see 2 stars, that indicates that you're using the back side of the paper. All right, and I just want to talk about that. So for our first patterned paper, it shows you the mint with white lines and then the Harbor painted background and texture paper on the back. So for this one, if you see a star like in here for layout 3, you're actually going to use the back side. Okay, so this will be the front side. This is the back side. All right. So as I just mentioned, BTB is background and texture paper, which is just a fancy way of saying patterned paper. DS means the dark side. LS means the light side. Now that has to do with your cardstock. So in your cardstock cutting, all right, you'll notice that the photo of the paper shows you the dark side on the front, the light side on the back. So every piece of cardstock you buy from Close to My Heart, with the exception of our neutrals, which are the black with black core, the white, and the French vanilla, they're all double-sided. And that means that you have the actual color on the front, which is the dark side, and then you have 1 shade lighter on the back. So same color, just 1 shade lighter. All right, so if I want you to use the dark side, which is the front, all right, always is the front, then I will indicate that with a DS. So if I want you to use the light side, that is the back, and so I will indicate that with LS. Okay, and then the last one is just that zip strip is the top 1/2 inch pattern strip. So that's another thing about Close to My Heart, is their branding strip that you see here on every single piece of patterned paper. On the other side is a usable 1/2 inch strip of some pattern or another. Okay, and for this one, we've got the stripes, we've got the rainbows, and we've got the polka dots. Okay, so those are the zip strips. And when you start cutting, that's always the first thing you do, is take off all your zip strips. All right, now next down below that are the bases that you're going to need for each of the layouts. Now don't forget in this case that layout 1 was the optional Cricut layout, and you do get a piece of white daisy cardstock with your Cricut cuts for that, because that's not included up here. So for layout 2, you're going to use 2 pieces of Harbor cardstock, and you're going to use the dark side for that. Layout 3, you're going to use the mint cardstock, the light side, plus, and you're only going to use 1 of those, and then the Harbor painted flowers BTB. Now remember, we know that now is background and texture paper, so that's the patterned paper, 1 of those. For layout 4, you're going to use 2 of the grape cardstock on the light side. And then for layout 5, you're going to use the mulberry branches, BTB, background and texture paper. You're going to use both of those. You can use 2 of them. Now remember that this is a guideline. If you want to change this up, go ahead. I encourage that. You do you. Now also in additional supplies, you also need a piece of lemonade cardstock, the dark side. All right, so you need a 1/4 inch by 12 inch piece. And then you also need a small piece to make a pennant. Okay, and I didn't want to include it in here because it's such a small piece that you need. All right. Before cutting, pull out all the needed base pages, trim off the zip strips and set those aside and use them as the place. Well, what I meant there, that's not actually very good wording, is when the base pages are set out, you're going to use them as a place to put all of the pieces for that layout. As you work through the cutting guide, create piles for each layout on the corresponding base pages. So when you're done cutting, you have everything for each page in one place. Okay, and the next one just talks about these the blah, 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 the videos that I'm doing right now. And then that there will be an hour-long Sawyer question and answer period over Zoom on March 8th. All right, so if you have any questions at all or any problems, that would be the time to ask. And then substitutions are always okay. I never expect you to buy everything on the list. Over time, you'll accumulate many things that can be used for lots of projects like stickles, liquid pearls, gloss sprays, etc. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to take off my zip strips. All right, just going to move this back. Okay, so when you're lining up your zip strips to cut them off and you close your trimmer, you just barely want to see that zip strip along your trimmer. Okay, now if you don't have the aluminum rail trimmer, then that mark would be the piece of metal wire that runs down there. So I'm just going to trim that off, set it aside. And I'm going to repeat that each one of these pages. And then at the end of the cutting guide, there are directions for what to do with the zip strips. It's a little bit much. And I tend to do my cutting of the zip strips on the pattern side rather than on this side. All right, because sometimes these zip strips are not exactly 1/2 inch. And you just want to make sure that you're cutting in the right place. And I find it just more helpful to cut it on the pattern side. One more to go. And then we're done. Okay, that's done. All right, so I'm going to just set these aside now, and we will come back to those at the end of the cut guide. Okay, and now I'm going to go back to my cut guide. I'm going to pull out my base pages so I can make my piles of cut pieces. So layout 1, we're not worried about here. Layout 2 says Harbor cardstock dark side 2. Okay, so both the base pages are Harbor cardstock. And just so you can get a clearer idea of the dark side, light side thing, okay, here you can see it up close. Dark side, light side. Same color. This is the darker side is the true color, and then the back is always one shade lighter. Okay, so that's for layout 2. And I'm just spreading these out on my desk. Layout 3 is 1 mint cardstock. on the light side, and that's this one. You can see the difference there, the light side. And then one harbor painted flowers. And I think that was actually my favorite paper in this collection. Sorry, just give me a second here. So, all right, so that's layout 3. Then layout 4 is 2 grape cardstock, and we're using the light side for that. Somewhere. Okay, so here is the difference. You can see light and dark, so we want both sides on the light side for layout 4. And finally, layout 5 is both of the mulberry branches paper. And that is this one. So you want 2 of those. All right. So now we're ready to cut. And I put the Harbor glitter paper at the beginning. All right, this is probably not, I wouldn't say complicated, but it's a little more challenging to read because I used a lot of strips in these layouts, and some of them are pretty narrow. All right, and it was hard to fit all of that in. So I'm just going to show you how I would read that and then carry on with the cutting. Now, one thing that I would tell you about cutting glitter paper, the glitter does not come off. All right, you can bend it, you can cut it, you can rub it with your hand, no glitter comes off. Okay, that's one nice thing I really like about the glitter paper from Close to My Heart. Okay, sorry. Decided they needed to talk to me at that exact moment. Okay, now what I was going to say about this glitter paper is that this is just a personal preference, but I always cut it from the back. And the reason for that is because the feeling of the blade on the trimmer going through the glitter just sets my teeth on. Yeah, don't like it. Okay, so I always cut from the back. All right, and now we're going to look at this direction sheet, and there are a lot of arrows here. So I'm just going to start at the top. Okay, and I'm going to cut for layout 2. I want to cut 4 1/4 inch by 12. Okay, so now we know on the smaller widths up to 1 inch or 1.25 inches, depending on your trimmer, that you cut to the left or to the right, sorry. Okay, you're going to measure from over here. Okay, so we want these to be 1/4 inch by 12. So I'm just going to give you a close up here on my trimmer. Okay, all right, and there, let me get something to point with. All right, so here is your trimmer blade groove or track right there. The very first line is 1/8. The next long, or the first long line, is 1/4. Then the next shorter line is 3/8, and then the next long line is 1/2, which is 4/8. Okay, so we want 1/4, and that is right there. Okay. All right, so now I'm just going to cut. It doesn't matter which direction you cut from, but I want 4 of them. Okay, so you can see I'm just measuring up to that 1/4 inch each time. Third one. Just backing off here again. Okay, and there is my 4th one. Okay, and then as it says on the instruction piece, these are all for layout 2. So that is where they're going, on layout 2 pile. Okay, the next one down, layout 3. We need 1/2 by 12 inch, and we're going to cut 1 of those. So this time, Okay, we want a half. Now remember I said the first long line was a quarter, the second long line was a half. So this time we're going to the half mark and we're just going to cut 1. All right, and that is for layout 3. Next, okay, is down here for layout. Just a minute here, I gotta look at it straight. So for layout 5, you need, sorry. Okay, so now we've come down to here. So now we need 1/8 of an inch by 12. Sorry, guess you want to look. Okay, cut 4 of those. Okay, sorry about that. Dogs were demanding attention. Okay, so getting back to what we were talking about here, which was for me 10 minutes ago. We need to cut 1/8 by 12. I'm going to cut 4. And then down below that, you'll see layout 5 gets 2 of them. Layout 1 gets 2 of them. Okay, so this time we're looking at 1/8. And remember, the first long line is a quarter. The first short line is 1/8. So we're going to cut up to there. Okay. And we want 4. So you see 1/8 is not very wide, but you know, this paper is just so stunning. You don't need a lot of it, which is why there's quite a few places where we have just a narrow strip of it. It's just enough to make it really look perfect. Okay, and so then the cut guide tells us layout 5 needs 2 of those. I still just love that mulberry and harbor together. And layout 1 needs 2 of them. Okay, so if you are doing the layout 1, the Cricut layout 1, then these you will put with that. If you're not doing the Cricut layout 1, you don't need to cut these. All right, next. Okay, I think we're done with all the skinny ones. So now for layout 3, we need a piece that is 3/8 by 5 1/4. Sorry, I have to read it straight. Okay, and that's sort of my pointer. That is this piece, slightly wider piece right there. Okay, and it says to cut 1. So we want a piece that's 3/8 of an inch wide. All right, and if we go back to our zoom, now we know that the first short line is 1/8, the first long line is 1/4, which is 2/8, and then the second short line is 3/8. Okay, so that's where we're going to cut to. Right. And then the directions tell us we want it to be 5 1/4 inches long. So I'm just going to turn it now. And I'm going to cut it. Remember, the long lines are 1/4 half, and I'm cutting it right to there. Okay, and then this is an extra piece. All right, so you can just set that aside. And this 3/8 by 5 1/4 is for layout 3. Okay. Sorry, whoops. Hope I'm not making you dizzy. Okay. So I think all the skinny pieces are cut now. And now, before we do anything else, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to cut this strip off, which is 6 inches. So we've got one piece for 6 by 10 and one piece 6 by 2. And those are both for layout 4. So I'm going to cut at 6 inches. Okay, and we still need this piece. And then we're going to cut at 2 inches for the bottom one. Now we know they're 12 inches each page. Okay, so we've got 6 by 10, we've got 6 by 2, and those are for layout 4. All right, So all we have left now is this piece here for layout 2, which is 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, and this piece here, which is 3 1/8 by 4 1/8. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this at 4 1/4 crossways, 4 1/4, the first one, and then the second one is 4 1/8. Okay, and I just want to show you again where I'm cutting that. Okay, so 4, first short line right there, 4 1/8. All right, so this is left over, but that's all. Oh, and this strip, that's all that's left of this sheet. So now the 4 1/8 piece, the other direction is 3 1/8. So you can see I'm bringing it up to the first short line after 3 inches, cutting there. And that is for layout 3. And then this one is 4 1/4. So I want to cut it at 3 1/4 for this direction. Okay, and that is for layout 2. Layout 2. All right, so that is it for the glitter paper. We've cut everything we needed to cut for the glitter paper. And this is what you have left of that piece of paper. All right, so you've got 2 really skinny ones, you've got a 1/2 inch one, and you've got this piece. Don't throw these away. All right, they're not recyclable. Glitter paper is not recyclable, but you never know. I never throw away my small pieces of glitter paper because glitter paper is always a good accent for things. So you never know when you might be able to use these. All right, so now we're moving on to our patterned paper. And the first one we want is our mint white lines and the harbor painted. So this is the harbor painted side, which is the back. And then this is the front. Now, if we look, I know it's kind of hard to see on here, okay? Even if I bring it up really close to you, okay? So what I'm going to do is pause for a second. Okay, so sorry about that. I realized as I was talking here that I didn't have my assembly directions printed out yet. Okay, so when I come to a point like this, and I know I have something that is not multi-directional, that means that the pattern goes one way or the other. So this way it's up and down, and this way it's side to side. So I want to know before I cut this exactly which way I need to have my paper facing. Okay, and my drawing here, or the piece of paper that I copied into the cut directions is not really that clear. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the assembly directions, and this is for layout 2. All right, so I'm going to go to layout 2, and I'm going to look at the picture, and I'm going to make sure that I understand which way they need to go. And I can see here that I want the white lines going up and down all the way across. Okay, so when I'm cutting this, now I know I need to have them going across. So I'm going to turn my paper this way. And remember, all right, that this is a cutting line. And that on your trimmer, this is a cutting line. Okay, so if I was to put my paper in like this on my cutting line, and then turn my trimmer this way so that it matches the cutting line here. All right, you can see that I'm cutting it the wrong way, correct? Because now all the lines are going to be going horizontally. So what I need is to have my paper going the other way, which is like this. All right, and now I have my cut line here. This is my cut line on my trimmer, and I can see that my paper is going to be cut so that the lines are going up and down. All right, and I want them to be at 3 inches, and I'm going to cut 2 of them. All right, so here we go, 3 inches. It's 1. There's 2. and those are both for layout 2. All right, next we need the back for layout 3, and you can see right there are 2 stars, which means we're going to use the back. All right, so I'm just going to flip it over to make sure I remember that, and I'm cutting 4 inches. Okay, and this paper, this side of the paper, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's multi-directional. Doesn't matter which side, which direction you go, the pattern looks the same. All right, now so this is for layout 3, 4 inches. Okay, and this is extra. All right, you can see down here that we have a strip here that's not labeled, and that is extra. All right, so now we're moving on to our multicolored leaves and our floral. All right, so now if we look at this pattern, which is the front side, this is the back side, which is shown on the cut guide the same way, front side, back side. All right, we can see that it doesn't really matter on this side which way we have it facing. And does it matter on this side? Not really. Okay, so it doesn't really matter. So if I look at my cut guide, all right, and I'm going to just turn it so I can read it a bit more easily. All right, starting over here, we want 3 pieces cut to 2 by 11. All right, and they are the back side. So that means it's going to be this flowered paper. All right, and they are 11 inches long each. Okay, so I'm going to just start cutting, and I want it on this side. And that way I don't forget which side I need to use. Oh, was that supposed to be 2 inches? Yes, it is. 2 inches. Go again. We want 3 pieces cut at 2 inches. Okay, and then I'm going to pick those up. And now this is another tip. I'm pulling out my longer measuring stick here, because sometimes these pages are not, when you get them, these papers are not exactly 12 inches. And so normally I would say, okay, you know, you wanted 11 inches, all you have to do is cut 1 inch off. However, because we know these papers sometimes are not exactly 12 inches, I don't leave that to chance, because I want everything to fit carefully or correctly. I go and cut it at 11 inches. All right, now let's look and see. Now, can you see? I guess you can't. Just a second here. I just want to show you this. All right, so you can see that this is actually a bit bigger than 1 inch. So I'm glad that I took the time to do that extra step. So I'm going to cut each one of these down to 11 inches. It's measuring out on my extended ruler. And because the pattern is multi-directional, it doesn't matter which end you cut off. Okay, so now I have my 3 pieces that are 2 by 11. Okay, and they are all for layout 2. All right, now the rest of this is cut on the front side. So I'm flipping it over, and I want, for layout 5, I want 2 pieces cut at 2.5 by 12 inches. So 2.5 inches. It's the second big line after the 2. Okay, and I don't need to turn any off, and these are for layout 5. And then you've got this piece left over, which you can also see right here. Okay, so that's it for patterned paper. You're going to have this one left over. Okay, lots of fun. You're going to have a great time using that paper up in other projects. And now we're going to start working on our harbor cardstock. Okay, and we need 1 of those. All right, so now looking at this, I'm going to say that I'm going to cut these two first. They're both for layout 5. They're 1 1/4 by 12 inches. Okay, and remember 1 1/4 we can cut on this side. Zoom in again for you here. All right, and if you look, you can see right here is the 1 inch line. And so the next long line after that is 1 1/4. So that's where I'm going to cut it to. So the first one. And there's the second one. Okay, and those were both for layout 5. All right, so now that we have those out of the way, our next cut is going to be this one right here. All right, so we want to cut this one at 6 1/8. All right, and I just want to make sure I'm looking at this one in the right direction. 6 1/8. Oh, oops, I guess you don't need this one zoomed in. Okay, 6 1/8, and then we're going to cut 2 pieces at 4 1/8. Okay, and one of those is for layout 1 and one is for layout 3. So if you're doing the the Cricut layout, you will put this on that pile, and if you're not doing the Cricut layout, then you don't need to cut this one. And this one is for layout 3. All right, so now this is an extra piece, and you can see that right here. There's a spot where there's no numbers, and that's an extra piece. Now for the next one, we're going to need 3 pieces cut, and they are all going to be 4 1/8 by 3 1/8. So I'm going to cut this the longest side, which is 4 1/8. This is an extra piece, and you can see that on your cut guide right here. I'm turning this, and I'm going to cut 3 at 3 1/8. Last one is just a little tiny piece left over, and you can see that piece right there on your cut guide. And these are all for layout 3. All right, so we didn't have much of that piece of harbor left over. This was it. Okay, just these little pieces. This cardstock is recyclable. Okay, next we want a piece of mint. All right, and now remember, the dark side is always the front. So we're looking for stars. And here we see that all 3 of these pieces are starred. That means we want to use the back side, right, which is the lighter side. For this one, I'm going to tell you to cut here first, or you could cut here first, one of the two. All right, don't cut this way, all right, because you will lose a large piece of paper that's extra that you can use for other projects. Okay, so I'm going to cut here, and I take that back. I'm going to cut here. Okay, so I need a 4 1/8 width. Remember, 1/8 is your first shorter line past the 4, and then we're needing 1 piece at 6 1/8 and 1 piece at 4 1/8. So this one's a square. Okay, this is extra. Okay, and these are both for layout 3. Okay, and then we're going to cut our last piece here, which is at 4 1/8. And so now you see you've got a nice big piece left over. And then we're going to trim that down to 6 1/8. That's also for layout 3. Okay, so when I'm cutting these out, I try and preserve as much of the leftover cardstock as I can. Okay, all right, so on to mulberry. Okay, and now we're just going to double check because we know the dark side is always the front. And I do not see any stars on this one, so we're cutting on the dark side. And the first cut is going to be for layout 4, we need 2 pieces at one end, 1 by 12 inches. Okay, and remember we can cut 1 inch on the right side. So I'm lining that up on the right at 1 inch. And we need 2 of them. And those are both for layout 4. All right, and so then I'm going to cut right here. I'm going to cut this one at 6 1/4. Turn it around 6 1/4. And we want 2 pieces that are both 4 1/4 inches wide. Okay, this is an extra piece. And both of those are for layout 5. And then we've got one last piece that's 4 1/4 inches square. So you see I'm cutting it this direction first so that I save this big piece of cardstock, which I can use on another project. Okay, and this is extra, and this is also for layout 5. Okay, moving right along. Okay, now we are down to White Daisy. Okay, so I've got my White Daisy, and remember White Daisy is the same color on both sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these 3 12-inch strips first. They're 3/8 inch by 12, and I'm cutting 3 of them. All right, so let's just zoom in here again. Okay, so remember we're cutting 3/8. Here's my pointer. So we know that the first short line is 1/8. The first long line is 1/4 or 2/8, and the next short line is 3/8. So we're going to cut on the 3/8 inch mark. So I'm lining that up. Making sure it's straight. Yes, it is. 1. Lining it up at 3/8 again. And at 3/8 again. Okay, so now this, it says for layout 2 and layout 4. Okay, and I didn't tell you how many of each to put. So I'm going to just set these aside for now, and then when we create layout 2 and layout 4, we will just have them to use. All right, so going back to the cut guide now, we see that we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mats at 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, and they're all for layout 2. Okay, so I'm going to make this cut first, which is at 4 1/4 inches. I guess you don't need that. So again, so much. And then I'm going to cut 3 pieces at 3 1/4 inch. This is leftover. And those are going to layout 2. And now I've got this piece left. Okay, and I need 2 more 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I want to preserve as much of this piece of leftover paper as I can. Okay, so I'm going to cut 1 piece out that's 4 1/4 inches wide, and then I'm just going to cut it in half, and that way I've kept as much of this as 1 piece as I can. All right, and so because this is going to be 2 pieces altogether, I'm just adding these numbers together. And if this is too complicated, if it doesn't make sense in some way, just go ahead and cut on this line again. All right, at 4 1/4 inches, and cut off your 2 3 1/4 pieces. All right, so I'm going to cut off 6.5 inches by 4.25 inches. Okay, so I've got 6.5 is perfect for this width. Okay. And 4.25. Okay, and this way I have a large piece of white daisy left over. And then I'm going to cut this in half at 3.25. Okay, I hope that wasn't too complicated. Okay, so I obviously measured this wrong. Sorry. 3.25, because I got one little slightly bigger piece. So I didn't measure that properly. Okay, so I've got 2 more here, 3.25 by 4.25 for layout 2. All right, so that is it for the main cutting. Now, with your leftover cardstock, you'll have your white daisy piece, your mulberry piece, and your harbor piece. All right, the reason why you have these left over is because to make a custom 12 pack, you have to order in 2s. So the minimum is 2, and then in multiples of 2 after that. All right, so you're always, or pretty much always, going to have at least one piece of cardstock left over. It's pretty hard to get it down to a science where we're using, excuse me, in multiples of 2 of everything, but these will definitely come in handy for you in future projects. Okay, so that's to the side with that piece of patterned paper. And now I want to go to the zip strips. All right, so for here we need all 3 types of zip strips. And the first one is the grape dots on the white, and that is for layout 5. And we want 2 cut to half by 12. Well, that's their size. So I'm just going to grab those out of this pile of extras now. So here I have the 2 grape dots on white, and I'm just going to put those as is into layout 5. The next one is the striped one. Okay, now that's for layout 2. No, sorry, layout 1. You're only going to use 1 strip. You've already cut it. All right. And you're going to cut it into lengthwise because you want 2 pieces that are 1/4 inch wide. Now, if you are nervous about cutting a piece that is already narrow into narrower pieces, then my advice to you would be to cut before you cut the zip strip off. All right. So I'm just thinking now, do I have a piece here that I can show you what I mean? Let me look here. Yes, I do. I have an extra piece of this. Okay. So here is my piece of patterned paper, my BTB, still intact. It's got its zip strip attached. So what I would do for that, just zoom in here. I want 2 strips that are 1/4 inch each. So before I cut it off, well, I've still got this piece of patterned paper attached. I would measure at 1/4 inch, cut that, and then measure at 1/4 inch again, and cut that. All right. Now, remember what I said about the zip strips not always being exactly 1/2 inch. So we do have a little bit of a white, I don't know if you can see it right there, just a tiny little bit of a white line. All right, that's okay. In the long run, nobody will notice. Okay, so you can do it that way, or you can put your already cut zip strip down on your trimmer like this. So you see I'm centering it between the 2 1/4 inch marks. One of them is here. So let me move this down just a little bit more so you can see better. One of the 1/4 inch marks is here, and then on the other side of the cut groove, the other 1/4 inch line. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure that's lined up all the way down. Lift your hands gently so you don't want the paper to move. Okay, and then you bring that down, and then you want to make sure that you are holding this down very firmly. Okay, when you get to this place, move your hand and keep holding it and then cut all the way up to the top. Okay, and so there you have your two 1/4 inch pieces. All right, so either way works. You do what's comfortable for you. And those are going to be for layout 1. So if you're not doing the I was going to say computer again, the Cricut layout, you do not need these, but this will be going on the Cricut pile. Okay, and then the last one is the rainbow. And that's for layout 4, and it says 1/2 by 12, cut 2. Well, that's the size they come in. So we're just going to grab those out of the pile. Oh, put them over here. Okay, so I've got my 2 zip strips that are 12 inches each by 1/2 inch. Okay, and those are going in the pile for layout 4. All right. That's it, ladies. We are at the end. I hope this helped. If you still have questions, please let me know. Don't forget that we will be doing a Q&A on March. Sorry, on March 8th at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Okay, so good luck with that. And stay tuned for video number 2, where we will assemble layout 1.